The rain fell in cold sheets over the Hollywood hills that March night in 2011, drumming against the windows of the Christie's saleroom, as if the city itself were mourning. Inside, under lights, sharp enough to cut glass, the La Peregrina pearl hung suspended in its Cartier, setting diamonds and rubies, framing the pear-shaped ghost of 5 centuries, while the auctioneer's gavel cracked like a verdict. It sold for $11,842,500, shattering every record ever set for a pearl jewel. The room exhaled. Murmurs rippled through the crowd of collectors and curious onlookers. But on the screen above, Elizabeth Taylor's face smiled from archival footage, violet eyes steady the same pearl resting against her collarbone as it had for decades. She had worn it like armor, like love, like a secret she refused to keep hidden. Yet here it was, detached, priced, gone. The Taj Mahal diamond followed, heart-shaped, inscribed with Mughal poetry of devotion, hammering at $818,500. The Elizabeth Taylor diamond, once called the Krupp 33.19 carats of cold fire, matched it exactly. By the end of the first evening alone, her collection had fetched $115.9 million. Across the full sales, over $137 million. The most valuable private jewelry collection ever offered at auction. The jewels that had defined her life now belonged to strangers, their stories reduced to bids and buyers' premiums. And somewhere in the shadows of that glittering aftermath, a question lingered unspoken. Had the weight of all that beauty finally been her undoing? If the distance between those staggering figures and the private wreckage of her life lands the way it should hit, like, share this video and drop a comment. What jewel from history do you think carries the heaviest price? Your thoughts keep these stories alive. Elizabeth Taylor did not inherit her empire of gems, the way old money dynasties passed down vaults of emeralds through quiet family trusts and discreet solicitors. She earned it piece by piece through a life that burned at a temperature most people simply cannot sustain. Hollywood's relentless spotlight fueled it. Her own unquenchable hunger for intensity made it inevitable. Born in 1932 to American parents in London, she was thrust into stardom before she could fully grasp what it meant. National velvet at 12. Those famous violet eyes already bending the world toward her like gravity bends light. The real fortune arrived later, when the machinery of celebrity collided with her absolute refusal to live small. She married 8 times to 7 men, each union a tempest of passion, betrayal, and eventual ruin. And the jewels, they arrived as trophies, apologies, declarations of ownership in a world that tried to own her right back. Mike Todd, her third husband, the brash Broadway-turned-Hollywood producer who made Around the World in 80 Days an Oscar-winning spectacle in 1956, showered her with rubies from Cartier while she lounged by a turquoise pool in St. Jean Cap Ferrat, the Mediterranean sun turning the water molten and the air thick with jasmine and salt. He handed her the red boxes without ceremony. She slipped on the earrings right there, leaning over the pool's edge to catch her reflection in the rippling surface, because mirrors felt too ordinary for the moment. "You are my queen," he told her in 1957. When he gave her the diamond tiara, a 19th century piece, heavy with old mine cuts that caught light softly like candle flame, through lace in a dimly lit cheech too. She wore it to Cannes that year, defying every unwritten rule that said tiaras belonged only to royalty or formal balls, not to red carpets buzzing with flashbulbs and cigarette smoke. Heads turned. Cameras exploded. She looked inevitable. Then came Richard Burton. The Welsh actor who would marry her twice raised the stakes to something almost mythic. In 1968, he bought the Krupp diamond for $350, roughly $8 million today, after fierce bidding at auction, then renamed it for her because she wore it every single day. On the set of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, in the kitchen of their Swiss chalet in Gstaad. Its azure-cut facets throwing sparks across breakfast tables, cluttered with scripts, half-empty champagne flutes, and cigarette ash. The Taylor Burton pear-shaped diamond 69. 42 carats carved from a 240 carat, rough by Harry Winston in 1969, started as a ring but proved too cumbersome for daily wear. She had it reset as a necklace so it could swing freely at her décolletage during late-night dinners at the Dorchester or on the yacht Charisma off Porto Cervo, the stone dominating photographs like a second heartbeat visible from across the room. The Bulgari emeralds, deep Colombian stones set in platinum with a tremblant brooch that quivered with every breath, came during the chaotic filming of Cleopatra in Rome, 1963. What most people never knew was how those pieces first entered her life. Burton would slip away between shooting days to the Bulgari boutique on Via Condotti selecting pieces, the way other men selected apologies with desperate precision and an open checkbook. Their green fire matched the intensity of the affair that scandalized the world and filled tabloids for years. Burton joked that the only Italian word she knew was Bulgari. The quip landed because it was essentially true. And the Taj Mahal diamond heart-shaped, engraved in Persian, with words of eternal love from the Mughal era circa 1627, arrived on her 45th day in 1972, presented on a gold and ruby chain by Cartier. Centuries of imperial devotion worn against her skin, woven into their own volatile romance that swung between ecstasy and wreckage. She once said she never took it off indoors, that she felt wearing it as though history itself were keeping her company. These were not mere gifts. They were proof of devotion spoken in the only language the very rich and the very famous truly share: extravagant, public, unapologetic. Each stone a monument to the moment she felt truly seen amid the glare. And yet, even as the jewels accumulated like armor plating against the world, the cracks were forming beneath the surface. Invisible at first, then widening with every grand gesture and every reconciliation that never quite held. Todd's death shattered the illusion first. Brutally, without warning. March 22, 1958. His private plane, the Lucky Liz, a twin-engine Lockheed Lodestar, painted silver and named for her, took off from Palm Springs, bound for New York amid light rain and deteriorating visibility. Taylor had a bad cold and stayed behind at their Beverly Hills home with their infant daughter, Liza. Kirk Douglas and his wife, Anne, had been invited along, but Anne had felt something she couldn't name and persuaded him to cancel at the last minute. Hours later, Douglas heard the news crackling over the radio mid-flight in his own plane. The Lucky Liz had gone down into the Zuni Mountains of New Mexico, exploding on impact, claiming Todd and 3 others' wreckage, strewn across snow-covered slopes, like the remains of a life interrupted. Taylor collapsed when the call came. She later described the grief as a physical tear in her chest, something that left her gasping on the marble floor, while the household staff tried to shield Liza from the sound of her mother coming apart. She converted to Judaism in his memory, honoring his faith in a private ceremony with a rabbi in Los Angeles. But the loss hollowed her out, left a void no spotlight could fill and no jewel could cover. Eddie Fisher, Todd's close friend, a popular singer whose marriage to Debbie Reynolds was the very picture of wholesome American domesticity, stepped in to console her. Within months, the consolation became something else entirely. The affair detonated across front pages while she filmed Cat on a hot tin roof in 1958, her eyes swollen from crying between takes in private dressing rooms. They married in 1959, but the scandal branded her a homewrecker. Fans picketed theaters. Reynolds wept in public interviews, and Taylor carried the weight of that public verdict like an invisible chain around her neck for years. The marriage crumbled fast. Fisher couldn't match the fire she required. By 1964, it was done undone by fresh betrayals on both sides. Then Burton and the affair that would define a decade. It ignited on the Cleopatra set in 1962, and never truly burned out 2 marriages, 1964-1974, then briefly again, 1975-1976, endless reconciliations, and separations fueled by alcohol jealousy and a mutual pull neither of them could resist or survive intact. They drank heavily. Burton once described their bond as 2 addicts who can't quit each other and fought with the same ferocity they loved. What their inner circle witnessed in those years was not glamour. It was 2 extraordinarily gifted people dismantling each other in slow motion, then rebuilding, then starting over. The jewels kept arriving with each repair, each apology. La Peregrina as a Valentine's Day gift in 1969. The Taj Mahal for her 40th birthday in the middle of yet another turbulent passage. But the dependence deepened. Prescription medications for chronic back pain, the result of scoliosis, and more than 30 operations over the decades. A tracheotomy in 1961 when pneumonia brought her to the threshold of no return during Cleopatra filming her system, failing on the operating table until the surgeons pulled her back. Alcohol to blur the edges of the noise in her head. And the relentless pressure of being, as she once confided in private letters, a freak, the most photographed woman alive, every movement dissected by strangers who had decided she belonged to them. The La Peregrina pearl carried its own particular shadow. 5 centuries old, once worn by Bloody Mary Queen Mary I of England, pinned to her bodice during her iron-fisted reign, it had whispered of ruined love long before Taylor was born. Mary's marriage to Philip I was loveless, childless, ending in her departure from this world at 42, hollowed out by illness and the weight of her own fanaticism. Legends spoke of the pearl bringing ruin to the romances of those who wore it. There was even a moment early in Taylor's ownership when she briefly mislaid it, only to find it lodged in the mouth of one of her dogs who had been quietly gnawing on 5 centuries of history. She laughed about it afterward, but the pearl had survived a Castilian court, a Tudor queen, and a Bel Air puppy without losing a single gram of its strange gravity. Some objects simply refuse to be diminished. Taylor laughed off the curse in interviews, calling it my pilgrim. Privately, the pattern repeated marriages, collapsing like houses of cards in high wind, her 4 children growing distant amid the chaos and constant movement, isolation creeping in like fog rolling off the Pacific at dusk. The Taj Mahal diamond carried its own version of this weight. Shah Jahan built the white marble mausoleum for Mumtaz Mahal after she was lost in childbirth in 1631. Devotion so absolute it became a monument visible from space. And yet the emperor ended his days confined in a tower by his own son, Aurangzeb, gazing at the Taj through barred windows, untouchable and alone. These were not supernatural curses. They were something more, unsettling echoes of hubris, of loving too fiercely, too publicly in worlds that punish excess with isolation and the slow unraveling of self. The shadow lengthened slowly, then all at once. By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, the grand gestures soured into regret. Burton's end came suddenly in August 1984, a cerebral hemorrhage at 58 in Sea-Ligny, Switzerland, a village that suited a man always running from something he couldn't name. Taylor was devastated. Private letters written years later revealed a soul still raw. Richard, my always forever love. Maybe you can hear and feel my soul. She had reached the edge more than once in those darker years, quiet, desperate choices made in the small hours, waking in hospital rooms with tubes in her arms, and regret heavier than any diamond. The body that had carried her through so much spectacle began to fail in earnest. The 1961 emergency tracheotomy that left a permanent scar she covered for the rest of her life with silk scarves or high collars, brain tumor surgery in 1997 that temporarily stole her sight in one eye, congestive heart failure diagnosed in the 2000s, confining her to a wheelchair and supplemental oxygen in her final years. She withdrew into her Bel Air mansion at 700 Nimes Road. The rooms filled with old master paintings, fine porcelain, and the soft clink of the gold charm bracelets. She still wore daily tiny tokens, engraved with her children's names, a film slate from The Taming of the Shrew, the Star of David from her conversion, after Todd's death. The parties grew smaller, the laughter rarer. The great jewels, once worn like a second skin, remained locked away more and more. Visitors in those final years noted how the house felt suspended in amber, beautiful, immaculate, and somehow sealed off from the present tense, as if time had quietly agreed to stop pressing her quite so hard. In her 2002 book, My Love Affair with Jewelry, she wrote, "I've never thought of my jewelry as trophies. I'm here to take care of it and to love it, for we are only temporary custodians of beauty." The words read as serene. Against the timeline, they carry the weight of quiet resignation. Beauty she guarded fiercely because everything else had slipped away one by one. One final detail worth noting: the Krupp diamond, before it became hers, had passed through the hands of Vera Krupp, wife of Alfred Krupp, whose family fortune was built in part through forced wartime labor under the Nazi regime. Stolen in a brazen 1959 Las Vegas robbery kit, before Burton acquired it at auction, even its provenance whispered of blood, exploitation, and loss passed down through generations. She wore it anyway every day, turning something tainted into something luminous. That perhaps was the most Elizabeth Taylor thing she ever did. The end came quietly. Not in dramatic flames or public scandal, but in the slow giving way of a body that had endured too much spectacle and too little peace. March 23, 2011. She left at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles at 79. Congestive heart failure claiming her after years of near misses and hospitalizations. No final cinematic scene with swelling music, just machines beeping softer, then softer still, until silence filled the room. Family at her bedside, the violet eyes closed for good, under lights that felt too harsh for someone who had lived her entire life in far more deliberate illumination. The auction came in December of that year. The proceeds, over $137 million after buyers' premiums, went partly to the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, a cause she had championed since the 1980s, when friends like Rock Hudson vanished from the world in stigma and silence while it looked the other way. The pieces scattered La Peregrina to an anonymous buyer at that record price. The Taj Mahal diamond, tied up in legal disputes when its sale unraveled over questions of Mughal attribution. The Elizabeth Taylor diamond, reportedly acquired by a Korean conglomerate for a luxury exhibition. The houses she shared with Burton, Casa Kimberly in Puerto Vallarta, with its heart-shaped pool, and the pink bridge he built so they could cross to each other without leaving their separate villas, are boutique hotels, now rented to tourists chasing the faded outline of a glamour that no longer lives there. The yacht Charisma, long sold and renamed. The fortune converted into legacy charity and scattered stones in distant vaults. What remains is the echo, faint but persistent, like the last note of a piano left untended in an empty ballroom. Those jewels, once warm against her pulse in candlelit rooms, now cold under museum glass or clasped around someone else's neck in a city that never heard her voice. Did they bring her power, or did they exact payment in quiet installments, each carat a fragment of peace traded for spectacle, each gift a reminder that even the most radiant lives carry a price no auction can fully calculate? She once said, looking at photographs of her younger self adorned in those pieces, "I wonder what will become of them when I'm gone. Scattered to the four corners, I suppose." Perhaps the real curse was never supernatural at all. It was the oldest, most human one, to want everything so fiercely to be loved, so completely, to shine so brightly, that you end up holding only memories, polished, priceless, and forever out of reach.